he's just asking about where the shark came from.
Don't you think that's a bit embarrassing? When a 90-year-old man asks you where to get your shoes?
No, it means
Inform us.
someone with a lot of knowledge knows I've got good shoes on. Someone who's been at the sea for many years.
Oh dear. What are we going to do with this job?
So we opened in 1995, and at the time we had 3 sharks in the exhibit. Maxine, Val, and I can't remember the name of the third one. And 3 raggies seemed like enough, and then at some point when I was the operations manager, Pat Garrett, he was then the curator, decided that we should increase that to 5 sharks, which kind of freaked the divers out at the time. But actually, I mean, now looking back, 5 sharks is a great number to have in that exhibit. Maxine had an amazing story. She was caught in Struisbaai and tagged with a spaghetti tag, and then she was caught again on the Natal coast and put back, in fact in the shark nets, and released alive, put back in the water, and then was caught again at Struisbaai. So she already had a great history. At the time the fishermen knew we were looking for sharks to put into the new shark exhibit at the aquarium, and so they gave us a call and we went and fetched Maxine. I think Maxine was the one that was actually put into the tidal pool at Cape Agulhas. We had an aquarist there kind of on duty to just stop people from doing their morning swims while there was a kind of 100-kilo ragged-toothed shark in the tidal pool at Agulhas. But the team popped through and collected Maxine, and so the aquarium opened with the 3 raggies.
Good morning. My name is Bolela Mbecheni. I am looking after this sharks exhibit, Save Our Seas exhibit. We have about 4 ragged-toothed shark in this tank, and the amount of water in this tank is about 2 million liters of water, and the wideness of the tank is about a tennis court. So these sharks, if you notice them, they are swimming different directions. So on top of this tank up here, we have some blowers where they blow the water through. So some of the sharks and those blowers are facing 2 different ways, so that the sharks, they must not swimming in one direction. So these sharks are swimming against those currents so that they can get some flash water in their gills. So we have only 4 sharks here now, and some of them, they are close to reach their maturity, and we just released one of them on March 18, which we took it out of the tank on February 18, placed it to quarantine so that our medical team can monitor the shark.
Hi there, my name is Inga and I'm the Senior Quarantine Aquarist, and welcome to Quarantine. Quarantine is the first port of call for the vast majority of animals when they come into the aquarium, and this includes our ragged-toothed sharks. So when sharks are coming into the building, usually what we do with them on that first day depends on how the animal is doing. But if the animal is doing really well, what we'll do is we'll take morphometrics. So we'll weigh them and we'll measure them, and then we'll also generally implant their PIT tag, which is like a microchip, and it just identifies that shark or fish or whatever animal we're microchipping as a specific individual. And then we'll also take blood so that we can see how they're doing on a deeper level. And then after that, we'll usually put them into our large porta pool, where we'll then monitor them for their time in quarantine. And during this time, that depends on how the animal was doing when they arrived. Did they need antibiotics? Because if they had any serious injuries or anything like that, we need to start them on antibiotics. but then we'll also start them, like try and get them eating. So we'll kind of feed them similarly to how they would be fed in our predator exhibit. So we'd offer them hake on a fork, a large fork. And then once they're eating and they're healthy and they're settled, we'll then start making plans to move them into our predator exhibit. But like I said, that time in quarantine is shark dependent. Sometimes it takes them longer to start eating. Sometimes they're just a bit more unsettled. But generally, once they're happy and ready to move into predator, we will liaise with our team, decide which day we're going to move them in on, because we'll need divers. So on the day we move them in, we'll hoist them out of quarantine, out of the big pool, and then we'll lower them down into the predator medical pool. This is where Ilse will do any final checks that she needs to do, and then 2 divers will go into the exhibit with her, and they'll just swim her around the space. Obviously it will be a new place for her, so we need to make sure that she is aware that there are windows, there is rock, so they guide her around the exhibit. And then once we see that she's happy and settled, the divers will get out of the exhibit, and then it's all about monitoring her. So we'll see how she settles in with the other sharks, with the other animals in the exhibit. We'll teach her how to feed properly from divers. And then she's happy and settled, and she can enjoy her few years with us before she too gets released back into the wild. After she's been with us for a few years, we'll then work in conjunction with our collections team, who will then get to plan releasing her back into the wild. So generally we don't do that planning. We've got a collections team, and they will work on planning when we get to release sharks, and they also do the collection of sharks, so that's all managed by our collections team.
Hi, I'm Kevin Spivey. I'm Curator of Operations and Animal Husbandry at the Two Oceans Aquarium. We'll talk to you a little bit about collections of our sharks. So we collect our sharks from the Eastern Cape, and we fish for them, so we target them specifically with rod and reel. We go to certain areas that we know where the raggies of the size that we are looking for occur. We often collaborate with a lot of the local fishermen to use their expertise in targeting very specific animals and very specific sizes. We normally look for females in the size range of between 50 and 80 kilos. The reason we look for that size range is because they're a lot easier to handle. We can land them easily, so there's less stress during the capture. We can carry them very easily to our truck. On our truck we have a transport tank at about 6,000 liters. So we try to get those animals as soon as possible from the sea into our transport tank. In that transport tank we have 100% oxygen running, so having a high oxygen environment helps those animals relax a bit. It reduces that capture stress. And then we try to get them back to the aquarium as soon as possible.
The trick really from the public perspective in terms of sharks for me is the manner in which they're handled. Often you see appalling pictures of them being dragged up the beach by the tail. They can't operate like that, and sand gets into the gills backwards, and so it's about handling the animals in a kind of respectful and a safe manner for the animals as much as for the handlers.
We feed the sharks more often enough, like once a week on Saturdays. And when they feel like hungry, they do help themselves sometimes in this fish. It's not something nice when the visitors are looking at that, but for us as animal keepers, it's good because we need to see if the sharks they can still feed themselves when we release them, because we don't keep them forever.
We do rotate the sharks every 5 to 8 years, so we normally catch them out of the wild when they're still juveniles, and then when they reach a certain age, normally sexual maturity, we decide, depending on their size and how long they've been in the aquarium, if they're ready for release. So normally how that works is that will be a huge discussion between the senior management and also the aquarist that works with them on the floor, and then we'll slowly start and determine at what time and when we will release the shark. And the sharks will then normally be assessed. We will then dart sedate the shark with certain sedation medication. So normally what happens then is the shark will just slowly start swimming more slowly, its breathing pattern will slow down, and that will give some of our divers a better chance of just swimming it slowly into a transparent nasal cone, where we can bring the shark up into the medical pool, and then we, from a veterinary side, can assess it a little bit better. That will include just doing a full health check. It will include drawing some blood just to see internally how the shark is doing, and then from there the shark will move to a quarantine section on the top of the aquarium, where it will stay for a minimum of 2 to 4 weeks. During this time, we will also be monitoring it. We will check weekly bloods as well, just to see if stress levels are normal, if patterns are normal. We will check for buoyancy in the shark. We will check for normal swim patterns. We will also just check for if there's any abnormal behavior and so forth. And then when at the end of this 2 to 4 weeks, if we're happy with all those parameters, like the swimming patterns, like the breathing patterns, like the internal bloods as well that we've been drawing weekly, then we will decide that it's time for the release.
When it comes to releasing our sharks, we will release them at the time of year when we know that sharks occur in those areas. That normally coincides with their natural migration patterns, and we will release them back in the areas where we captured them from. So we'll take them back up to the Eastern Cape side and we release them there. We do also release in the Strathspey area. Ragged-toothed sharks do occur there naturally. That is part of their natural home range. So between Strathspey and the Eastern Cape, that's where we release our animals. In terms of the size that they get to in the release, so we try to release them before they get too big to handle. Again, the bigger animals are a lot harder to handle. It increases the risk of stress on the animals. So when they get to about 180 to 200 kilograms, that's when we start looking at releasing them. At that size, we can easily handle them. We can take them out the exhibit and transport them to our transport tank again, and they are not too big for our transport tank.
It was about 2003. I'd just taken over as curator, and up to then we'd introduced sharks to the exhibit, gone out and caught them, kind of 80-kilo animals, and then brought them back in our transport containers and truck, and introduced them. And Pat decided, after having been, I think it was at one of the WASA meetings, where at the time it was becoming imperative for kind of modern aquariums to have a conservation and research agenda to go with their general functions of being open to the public. And so he suggested, given Maxine's story, and Leslie Rochard approached us with the idea that we could release Maxine as part of a kind of public campaign. So to be honest, at the time I'd really thought Pat had kind of lost his mind, because as much as we'd introduced 80-kilo sharks into the exhibit, we'd never contemplated removing a 200-kilo shark from the exhibit. We used, in those days, we used Valium. We didn't have a vet on site, and Valium was kind of what we'd used in the past, but it's not terribly effective on the sharks. I believe the dose that we give sharks, which in some cases didn't sedate them at all, is enough to kill a horse. But either way, we started with Maxine. We approached Malcolm Smale, a leading shark scientist. He was at Bayworld in PE, but actually with the museum in Port Elizabeth, and Mike Mayer from at the time Oceans and Coasts, which is now DFFE. And they'd both had experience with satellite tags, because we had no experience with pop-up. These are pop-up satellite tags. There's real-time satellite tags that you can put on great whites, but those need to dry for a period, and great whites spend quite a bit of time on the surface. So it dries, and then it can send a signal and tell you where it is. The pop-up archival transmission tags, PAT tags as they're called, those you program with a specified release date. I think with Maxine we chose 3 months and then 6 months. Any longer than that in our waters, they get so covered in growth that the problem is they might not pop up to the surface. They might actually sink after they release from the shark. And we then removed Maxine from the exhibit and designed a kind of research program around it, where we would release a shark from the aquarium and then within the next few days, fish in the Stroosbaai area and hopefully catch a shark of similar size and then put a PAT tag on those as well. Just to see, firstly, if our sharks were behaving the same as wild ragged-toothed sharks, and then we could kind of judge the effectiveness of releasing sharks. But also, no one had ever put satellite tags out on ragged-toothed sharks, so it was a great opportunity to learn something new about them. And I know Malcolm Smale originally, just from a lot of recreational anglers, the kind of shark fishermen, they catch a lot of ragged-toothed sharks along the coast, and so there was a lot of data, but from spaghetti tags. So he felt that we already kind of knew what we needed to, but actually some fascinating information came out of the 5 years of putting satellite tags out on the raggies.
So we have acoustically tagged quite a few of our sharks for release when they've been released. And the reason we did this was to be able to determine whether they are able to adapt back into the wild after being in an aquarium environment. And the data is showing that they have done very well. We've had multiple sharks having multiple years of detections, which shows that they are surviving long term. And this goes to, it just helps us know that these animals are surviving once they've been released and that they're doing very well. A lot of the data is showing that they're doing their annual migrations, they're moving up the coast and moving back down. So it's always good to know that reaffirm what you hope for and what you think they're doing, and it's nice to have that data to back up those thoughts. The first shark that I ever released from the aquarium, her name was Sam. She was just over 200 kilograms, and we released her in Stroosbaai. And she was re-caught in Mozambique 3 months later. So she swam from Stroosbaai up to Pontedora in just under 3 months. She was tagged with a Ori dart tag, and the person that caught her identified the number on the tag, and it was reported back to us. So it was quite a thing to see her swimming that distance in such a short time. And also, being my first shark that I released in Stroosbaai, it was very awesome.
My favorite shark story has to be Jen, because generally I'm involved strictly in the quarantine processes when it comes to the sharks, outside of diving to feed them. But Jen was the first shark who I was lucky enough to actually go on a release for. So being involved with her, I started here in 2017, and yes, this is my first shark release. But so being involved with her from 2017 all the way through up until her release is such a magical experience. Seeing how she's grown, seeing how she's developed while she's been here, getting her ready for release, and then being with her while we walk her out into the ocean back home. The whole experience was just absolutely magical. She was a very calm shark in my experience, and I'm glad that she's now back home, and that she served her time here as an ambassador for her species and is now free. She's hopefully happy to be back in the big blue, and I was just really happy to see her grow.
So given that ragged-tooth sharks are quite common on our coast, and we realized early on that they were not going to breed in this exhibit, and in fact worldwide I think 3 or 4 successful captive breeding events have taken place over decades, and there's a big move to try and get captive breeding of ragged-tooth sharks because so many aquariums have them, but those aquariums just have to buy them and then they keep them forever. We realized when we started the program that we're actually better off not keeping males, just keep females, and we only keep them for kind of 5 years maximum. By then they've grown from 80 kilos to 200. We release them nowadays with ultrasonic tags, which have a 10-year battery life, and an amazing data has been gathered on that. And Kevin Spivey, one of our curators, is busy doing his master's degree. But we're in a very fortunate position having them readily available on our coast, and also the Two Oceans Aquarium. We really aim to display animals around our coast, the two oceans, and to explain to the public the differences between them. And in doing that, in terms of shark conservation and caring for sharks, we're not really a nation that eats shark. But unfortunately we have a large fishery, a longline fishery for sharks on our coast, and those are mainly exported to Australia, I believe, and some to Europe. But fishing for sharks is just, it's really ecologically unsustainable. They're long-lived, slow-growing. They have very few young, and it's just not an ideal animal. Wherever there have been shark fisheries around the world, they've generally failed, and the species declines quite rapidly. So one of the areas that South Africans can help protect sharks is just by supporting MPAs, by making more of MPA Day and supporting the formation of new MPAs, especially in areas that protect sharks. So we've got a few at the moment. Protea Banks off the Natal South Coast is a shark area for Zambesis and tigers, and certainly raggies. There's Alawal Shoal, which is famous for ragged-tooth shark diving, and Isimangaliso further north there's tiger sharks there that spend. A lot of these large sharks travel great distances. I know the ones tagged in Isimangaliso have headed across the Indian Ocean to the Seychelles, I think they were picked up in, but when they come back they still spend a fair portion of their time within marine protected areas, which gives them some coverage.
A lot of our guests that come through and see these animals in these exhibits, they may never see a wild shark. They may never see a wild shark in its natural environment. Yeah, they get to appreciate them. We educate all our guests in terms of, like, sharks aren't these vicious, fierce animals. We dive in this exhibit almost on a daily basis. And that just shows the public get to appreciate that side of the shark. When the public see divers in the exhibit, they notice that the sharks avoid the divers. They don't come close. One of the biggest things we often do in our releases is we have the public come up and they're able to see and be not indirectly involved, but they're part of the release. They're there to watch these animals be released back into the wild. And for some people in these coastal communities where we do release, they've never seen a shark before. They've never seen a wild shark. Sometimes you got little kids, that's their first time seeing sharks, all the way through to older people. And yeah, like I said, a lot of them have never seen sharks before, a wild shark alive and being released. They've often seen them when fishermen have caught them, and the commercial side of shark fishing and that side. And they get to a new appreciation for these animals and how awesome they are, and being able to release them back into these coastal communities, you can hopefully reach a few more people, and they're able to be more educated and pass those messages on to their friends and families.
Sometimes what has been difficult for me is going through and seeing animals and realizing that they're in captivity. And I've had to take a step back from it and think about it, and think about the role that we play here and what we do for our visitors. And I know that if I had never seen these animals in the aquarium, I would not appreciate them to the same degree that I do now. So even though sometimes it's difficult to see them in captivity, and I know that they are ambassadors, they're here for a purpose, teaching us about their kind.
you know, if you want aquarists to look after the animals well, then you do form a bond with them. Some people, there were a few tears from the aquarists saying goodbye to them. I think, yeah, from my side, it's just, yeah, she's done her ambassadorship with us, and now it's time for her to go and be a shark.